If you were paying any attention to the news during the week of July 13th through the 19th in 2026, what we'll call week 29, you probably felt like you're looking at this chaotic, completely disconnected mess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it really felt like everything was happening everywhere all at once.
Right. You had military strikes escalating between the U.S. and Iran. You had oil prices suddenly spiking, even though global demand forecasts were actually dropping, which makes no sense.
Yeah, that confused a lot of people.
And then entirely new AI export rules were being thrown around in Washington. And simultaneously, you had all these strange warnings cropping up about local electricity grid delays.
It was a lot.
If you just skim the headlines, it honestly looked like the world was fracturing in like 10 different directions at once.
It definitely looked that way on the surface. And honestly, it's easy to see why people felt so overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah.
When you have maritime conflicts, tech wars, and, utility shortages all flashing red at the exact same time, the natural human instinct is to just treat them as totally separate crises.
Well, and that's exactly why we are doing this deep dive. Our mission today is to dig into this incredibly detailed structural report from week 29 and prove to you that these headlines are not separate stories at all.
Not even a little bit.
We're going to connect the dots between maritime logistics, global finance, and AI infrastructure to show you the hidden architecture of how the world is actually operating right now.
And it all hinges on one massive shift in how we really need to think about the global economy.
Let's lay that out.
Right. So for decades, we have been conditioned to worry about running out of physical stuff.
Like actual commodities.
Exactly. We worry about a lack of oil in the ground, a lack of silicon for microchips, a lack of copper for wires. But if you look at the mechanics of what actually happened during week 29, physical scarcity wasn't the primary issue.
The stuff was there.
The resources existed. What is actually becoming scarce is the right and the capacity to remain reliably connected to those resources.
I want to pause on that for a second because for you listening right now, understanding this shift is basically the ultimate shortcut to seeing how the world actually works.
It really is.
It's not about whether the oil or the computer chip exists somewhere on Earth, right? It's about whether you have the privilege, the capital, and the political clearance to actually plug into it.
Precisely.
And we are going to show you how global military posturing and AI trade wars eventually trickle down to determine your local power bill and the operating costs of your business.
To really see how that connection mechanism works in practice, I mean, we have to look at the most visible point of physical friction from that week.
You talk about the maritime stuff?
Yeah, the maritime restrictions and the military exchanges happening between the U.S. and Iran around various ports and oil facilities.
So when I first read about this in the sources, my immediate thought was just explosions.
Right. Yeah, the action movie version.
Exactly. I picture ships being blown up or this physical blockade where warships just line up and stop anything from moving. But the reality is way more bureaucratic, isn't it?
Oh, it is much more bureaucratic. What's fascinating here is that a shipping route might technically remain geographically open and totally navigable.
The water's still there?
The water is there, but the overlapping conditions required to actually access that water, they change completely.
How so?
Well, when military tensions rise, shipping decisions suddenly have to factor in this dizzying array of variables. You have vessel registration, you have beneficial ownership.
Which is who actually owns the ship.
Right, exactly. Plus, the exact nature of the cargo, the port history of the vessel, the insurance premiums, sanctions exposure, and even whether payment settlements can legally clear through international banks.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let's unpack this because I think a lot of people assume that if a ship wants to sail, it just sails.
Yeah, they do.
How does a payment settlement clearing through a bank actually stop a massive cargo ship in the middle of the ocean?
Think about the journey of a single, hypothetical oil tanker during week 29. The ship itself might be perfectly fine. The crew is ready to go.
Okay.
But that ship is owned by a holding company registered in Cyprus. And the compliance software at a major international bank traces the ultimate owner of that holding company back to an entity that was just hit with a new sanction.
Because of the military strikes that weekend.
Exactly. Suddenly, the bank refuses to process the $500,000 transit fee required to move that ship through a canal or a specific port.
Wow, just frozen.
Because if the bank processes a transaction for a sanctioned entity, they face billions of dollars in regulatory fines. So their automated compliance algorithms just freeze the money.
The ship doesn't move.
It doesn't move, and not because there is a warship parked in front of it, but because the digital ledger in London or New York won't let the payment clear.
So it's like trying to get into an exclusive club where the physical door is technically wide open, but the bouncer changes the dress code, the entry fee, and the acceptable ID like every 5 minutes, depending on exactly who you are.
That is a very accurate way to look at it. The physical door hasn't closed, but the legal and commercial threshold to walk through it has become absolutely exhausting.
So the route is open, but practically impassable for certain people.
Exactly. A shipping lane can remain geographically navigable while becoming functionally impassable for certain actors because they can't secure the insurance, or their bank won't process the fees.
But trade didn't just stop. I mean, the world didn't end in July 2026,
Yeah.
which means the system found a way to keep moving, just differently.
Yeah, it became what the structural analysts call probabilistic logistics.
Probabilistic logistics.
Right. The system hasn't halted, ships are still out there moving, ports are open, and oil is still physically flowing, but the absolute certainty of A to B delivery is just gone.
It's a gamble.
Totally. Delivery schedules become wildly unreliable. Insurance costs spike unpredictably depending on the day's headlines, and routes are constantly shifting on the fly.
The sources mentioned that over that specific weekend in week 29, the actual traffic moving through the Strait of Hormuz visibly dropped. But it wasn't a total blockade, so it's not a red light stopping global trade. It's more like a permanently flickering yellow light.
Yes, exactly. And when everyone hits a flickering yellow light, what happens? They inch forward, they slam on the brakes, they pay higher tolls, and they constantly recalculate their GPS routes.
Contract decisions probably slow way down, too.
Oh, they grind to a halt. Some smaller companies just choose not to transit at all because they literally can't afford the risk.
Right.
But for the massive volume of trade that absolutely has to keep moving, that friction creates these massive shockwaves, and those shockwaves have to go somewhere.
Well, where do they go? Because the surrounding countries in the Gulf places like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, they usually try to stay out of the direct line of fire, right?
Yeah.
Like neutral zones.
Neutral implies they were just passively sitting there untouched, but the reality outlined in the data is that they function as an absorbing membrane.
An absorbing membrane. Okay, explain how that actually works in this context.
It means these neighboring states are actively soaking up the logistical shocks. When a route through a conflict zone becomes too risky, these countries provide the alternative rerouting options for flights and ships.
Oh, okay.
They manage the military interceptions in their airspace. They absorb the market volatility in their own ports. They act as this buffer to keep the wider global system moving.
But that has to be incredibly expensive.
Immensely expensive. It takes diplomatic effort, massive infrastructure spending, and physical resources. So the stability you see in those neighboring regions isn't an absence of tension. It's the active, incredibly costly absorption of tension.
Okay, so if the boats are moving probabilistically and the surrounding countries are soaking up all this friction and cost, how does that affect the price of what's actually on those boats?
This is where it gets really counterintuitive.
Yeah, I want to talk about the oil markets from week 29 because this part genuinely confused me when I was reviewing the notes.
You're thinking of the OPEC forecast.
Yes. During this specific week, OPEC released a forecast that officially lowered their projection for global oil demand for the rest of 2026. Less demand.
Right.
But then the price of Brent crude oil suddenly surged to nearly $85 a barrel and then crossed $90 right after the weekend military strikes.
Yep.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If demand is down, why on earth did the price go up so sharply? I mean, Economics 101 says if demand drops, the price is supposed to drop. Did the commodity traders just lose their minds that week?
Economics 101 assumes a frictionless world.
Fair point.
It assumes this perfect vacuum where supply reliably and seamlessly meets demand. But the market during week 29 was fundamentally shifting its pricing model.
How so?
The price of oil was no longer simply measuring current physical supply versus current demand. Traders were pricing in expected connectivity.
Expected connectivity. So they were looking at that flickering yellow light and putting a price tag on it.
That's the exact mechanism. Traders aren't just looking at how many barrels of oil exist in the ground or, how many cars are driving in Europe. They are frantically evaluating the legal and bureaucratic friction we just talked about.
Like the bouncers at the club.
Exactly. Will insurers keep covering the voyages to get the oil out of the Gulf? What are the odds of military attacks expanding into those absorbing membrane countries?
Oh, man.
And if a ship has to take an alternative, longer replacement route around Africa, will that even remain economically viable?
So the price is no longer just about the oil itself. It's a signal of future access.
You are paying a premium for the probability that the resource will actually arrive. You are paying for the right to remain connected to the supply.
That is fascinating. We've got military maneuvering, changing the rules of physical access, logistics becoming a game of probabilities, and commodity prices reflecting the anxiety of connection rather than just supply.
Yep, it's all tied together.
But how does this connect to the tech world? Because the exact same dynamic of restricted connectivity isn't just happening with physical cargo ships. It is happening in the digital realm with artificial intelligence, which, I mean, it feels like a completely different universe.
It feels different because one involves steel ships and the other involves code, right? But structurally, they are identical.
Okay, break that down for me.
During that same week, we saw major geopolitical moves regarding AI. China was actively working to expand its AI connectivity sphere, setting up training and cooperation bases across the global south.
Specifically targeting places within BRICS and ASEAN,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Basically offering access to their AI infrastructure as a diplomatic tool, like, hey, stay in our orbit and we'll make sure you have the computing power you need.
Exactly that. And simultaneously, the U.S. was aggressively restructuring its export controls.
Doing the exact opposite.
Right. They were tweaking the rules to maintain an incredibly tight grip on high-end semiconductors and advanced AI technology, making sure they control who gets the really fast chips.
So they are using different approaches.
The U.S. and China are using very different diplomatic methods, yeah, but both superpowers are operating on the same underlying logic.
And that logic is tied to this term from the sources that we really need to unpack. A national operating system.
Yes, a crucial concept.
When I first read that, I'm assuming we aren't talking about Windows or Mac OS here, right? Because honestly, a DMV-run operating system sounds terrifying.
It would be, but no, it's not a software interface. When structural analysts talk about a national operating system, they are referring to the national-level arrangement and control of the entire AI stack.
The stack, okay.
It's not just the algorithm, it's the semiconductors, it's the sheer computing capacity, it's the massive amounts of electricity required to run the data centers.
The hardware and the power.
All of it.
Yeah.
Plus the cloud platforms, the technical standards, and the export rules that govern it all.
So it's the entire physical and regulatory environment that allows the digital software to exist in the first place.
Yes. Both the U.S. and China are increasingly treating AI not as a consumer product like a smartphone to be freely traded on the open market, but as a strategic resource.
Right, like oil.
Exactly like oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. The access conditions to this strategic resource are being politically managed. They are building massive, fenced-in digital gardens, and they are writing extremely complex rules about who holds the key to the gate.
But here is where the physical world comes crashing back in. Because the ambition to build these massive, globally fenced national operating systems for AI is hitting a colossal physical roadblock.
A huge one.
The report calls this the velocity mismatch. And to me, this seems like the single most important friction point in the entire global economy right now.
It is arguably the defining bottleneck of the 2020s. The velocity mismatch is the brutal difference in speed between digital ambition and physical reality.
Think about how fast the digital side moves. I mean, an AI model can be updated and deployed globally in a weekend.
Very true.
A tech company's market valuation can soar by $50 billion in an afternoon. A government agency can draft and announce a new semiconductor export rule in a matter of days. The software, the money, and the politics move at absolute light speed.
But then look at the physical systems required to actually run those AI models.
Right.
Power generation plants, heavy-duty transmission grids, massive data centers, specialized cooling systems, semiconductor fabrication plants, and the skilled workforce, the actual human electricians and engineers needed to build all of it.
You can't just code a power plant.
You cannot. Those physical projects take years, sometimes over a decade, to permit, fund, and construct.
I was trying to visualize this earlier. It's like trying to download a massive next-gen 8K video game on a 1990s dial-up connection. The software is ready to go, it's brilliant, but the physical hardware is practically choking.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that friction is exactly what the data from week 29 was measuring. The bottleneck isn't happening inside the code of the AI model.
Where is it happening then?
It's happening at the boundaries, where the digital world touches the real world.
Give me a concrete example of what that choking hardware looks like for an average community.
Well, it shows up as a 2-year delay to connect a new data center to a local power grid because the utility company literally doesn't have the transformers available.
Oh, wow.
It shows up as astronomical water demand. These massive AI server farms generate incredible heat, right? And they require millions of gallons of water for their cooling system.
Which is a huge issue in a lot of places.
Exactly. Suddenly, you have a multinational tech giant quietly buying up water rights in a rural area, pitting the data center directly against local agriculture and farmers during a drought year.
That's intense.
And it also shows up as surging local construction costs because every available concrete contractor and electrician in a 100-mile radius is being hired at a premium to build server farms.
So if the physical hardware is choking and the global supply routes for the necessary materials are acting like a flickering yellow light with probabilistic logistics, who actually survives all these bottlenecks?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because the really stark point in this data is that these constraints are not stopping AI growth, and they aren't stopping global trade.
No, the system isn't collapsing. It is doing something much more profound. It is selecting the participants.
Selecting them.
Yes. The friction doesn't halt the system. It acts as a very brutal filter.
Explain that filter. Who actually makes it through?
Well, only the absolute biggest players can afford to play the game when the rules get this difficult and this expensive.
Makes sense.
Only giant multinational corporations and sovereign nation-states can afford to design and fabricate their own dedicated custom silicon chips.
Right.
Only massive logistics companies can afford the skyrocketing insurance premiums for shipping through conflict zones. And only the tech titans have the long-term capital required to build their own dedicated power substations or negotiate nuclear power contracts just to guarantee their data centers stay online.
So it's survival of the most heavily capitalized. If you are a mid-sized startup or, a developing nation that doesn't have incredible diplomatic leverage, you just get squeezed out.
You do.
The constraints select the participants, and the system hardens around a few core players while thinning out for everyone else.
That is the structural reality we're moving into.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Because we've spent this deep dive talking about global supply chains, AI operating systems, U.S.-Iran military strikes, and nation-states.
Big picture stuff.
Yeah, but who is actually paying the final bill for these massive power grid upgrades, these highly insured cargo ships, and these data centers buying up all the water?
That brings us to a really fascinating concept the analysts call the silent membrane.
The silent membrane.
Right now, the immediate costs of all this friction, the higher shipping rates, the massive capital expenditure for AI infrastructure, they are mostly trapped in corporate negotiations, B2B contracts, and wholesale market prices.
So the giant companies are just absorbing the hit on their balance sheet so the consumer doesn't panic.
For now, yes. The friction is delaying the impact on household living costs. The everyday consumer hasn't fully felt the brunt of it yet.
But they will.
Eventually. The staggering burden of AI electricity demands, the massive water usage, the supply chain insurance premiums, these haven't fully crystallized into a unified, everyday political issue at the kitchen table. But the data shows they're definitely moving steadily in that direction.
It's like a delayed fuse. The costs are building up in the wholesale energy markets and the construction sector.
Right.
But eventually that silent membrane breaks.
Right.
And that cost gets passed down to the retail level, to your monthly power bill, to the cost of the physical goods you buy at the store.
The system isn't collapsing, it's just adapting by becoming more expensive, more exclusive, and much more politically managed.
Let's pull all of this together. We started by looking at a week of seemingly random, chaotic headlines. But what this deep dive has revealed is a single, unified structural shift.
Exactly.
The military strikes in the Middle East, the paradox of oil prices spiking despite low demand, the geopolitical fencing of AI technology, and the years-long delays in upgrading our power grids, they are not separate crises at all.
No, they are all symptoms of the exact same condition. They are all manifestations of a world where physical resources are no longer the only limiting factor.
Right.
The new defining metric of global power is whether you have the privilege, the capital, and the security to maintain reliable access to the critical systems that make the modern world run.
It's a profound transition. I mean, we are moving from a world of open markets and assumed access to a world of gated communities, and probabilistic logistics.
A very restricted world.
A world where the national operating system dictates who gets to connect, and the sheer physical friction of the velocity mismatch ensures only the absolute giants can afford the price of admission.
This raises an incredibly important question, though, and it's something the source material touches on at the very end in its branch gradient log regarding future reversal conditions.
Oh, like the breaking point.
Exactly. If the current structural system heavily favors massive, centralized players who can afford to buy their way through this immense friction, what happens when the smaller players inevitably push back?
Wait, really?
Mm.
That is the million-dollar question. Because people aren't just going to accept being filtered out of the modern economy forever.
Could we see a near future where local communities, mid-sized businesses, and even smaller nations simply decide the global toll booth is too expensive?
What would they even do, though?
What if they start aggressively building their own decentralized, off-grid power generation? What if they invest in localized computing resources and open-source AI models just to bypass this entire selection process entirely?
Oh, wow.
If the core of the system becomes too expensive and too hard to access, the periphery might just build its own parallel network.
A completely parallel, decentralized operating system born out of pure necessity, just because they were selected out of the main one. That is a wild, very real thought to end on.
It's definitely something to watch for.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your week, whether you're dealing with a supply chain delay in your own business, reading about tech stocks, or just wondering why your local utility company is suddenly raising its rates to build new substations, keep an eye out for these velocity mismatches.
They are everywhere.
Think about who is being given the right to connect and who is being filtered out. The friction is obvious once you know how to look for it. Keep questioning the headlines and stay curious.